we go, here we go. It's the Paircast.
All right, so I think we're live. Let's just double check here so we don't have technical difficulties like we had last time.
Mute this and turn the volume up just to make sure we have sound.
All right, so we're live. I'm Scott.
I'm Cameron.
And this is the Paircast, episode 4.
Yep.
Working through FactoryBot. Did you want to give a quick intro?
Well, first off, say thank you to 2 Cents for hosting us today. It's 2 Cents, SENSE.ai. They're hiring. So check out what they're working on and give them a message. The gist of what we're doing today and what we've done over the past few weeks is an idea we came up with to explore open source software and programming through pairing and in like a streaming environment. And the motivation is just basically to learn, to practice, and have fun. And that's what we're doing today. We're gonna work on the FactoryBot gem by Thoughtbot, and the beginning of this exercise was to delete all of the implementation code from FactoryBot's implementation and just keep the tests, and to run the tests and get the test passing step by step. So far, we've gotten the bulk of the boilerplate out of the way, scaffolding for constant loading, that kind of thing. So the tests are running, and we've got some green tests. So I think we'll pick it up from there.
Yeah, where did the idea come from?
Oh, right. So I have a background in fine arts, and one of the exercises that we did in art school was to do master copies. Master copies is a tool for learning where you literally copy line for line one of the great masters' drawings or paintings. So I did a painting after Velázquez, and this is not an unusual exercise for art education. And
it's a little unusual in programming.
Yes, I had never heard of it in programming, and we decided we would give it a try. And I think so far so good. We've one other thing I wanted to note, we've sort of seen some emergent principles as we've been working. One of which we commented on between us the other day was not checking Stack Overflow or Google. I'm not going to hold us to that, right. But we've managed to go through all 3 of the previous Paircasts with just using a debugger and IRB and what have you, the tools available to us, which is fun. Not to say there's anything. I do believe that one of the qualities of a good programmer is speed of Stack Overflowing.
we were joking about endorsing each other for Googling and Stack Overflowing programming problems that you're having.
Yeah, so go to my LinkedIn and upvote my Stack Overflow skills.
Yeah, that's the thing. One of the thoughts I had, and like one of the motivations I had for like thinking about streaming and live streaming was that while like I said, I think in the first episode, I'm a subscriber to Destroy All Software. I love what Gary Bernhardt's doing, and I mean, watched Railscast and Avdi Grimm's Ruby Tapas. My process is a lot different, and there's a lot more Googling and a lot more it's a lot less streamlined as theirs are.
Yeah.
And they put a lot of work into making sure they're like bite-sized and easily digestible. But I was thinking it would be interesting to see like more of the process that that we go through
right,
every day.
Right. Right. Yeah, this is not rehearsed.
Yeah, no,
You're in the live studio audience.
Um,
we're completely improvising and winging it and learning as we go. So.
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking about, I've read some of what Gary Bernhardt's talked about of like doing take after take after take, and I definitely don't have the patience to put that much time into making like high quality video the way he does. So I'm curious if there was something on the flip side of like kind of figuring it out as we went along and streaming that.
Yeah.
So
let's.
So on the flip side of that, there is not much Googling going on. So it is kind of giving the kind of the wrong impression, but I think with the tests and what we found is that a lot of times we don't really need to know what these things are. We can just, if the test passes, that's kind of good enough for us. Right. So
the other thing I thought about this is that maybe it has something to do with Ruby and test-driven development. And in fact, I think it does. That Ruby, this is true with a lot of languages, but I think Ruby is very expressive, and there are a bunch of different ways to do any given thing. So with just sort of the core idioms and understanding of how Ruby should work and how a programming language should work, we can come up with solutions that maybe are not perfectly factored, or maybe aren't the way that the implementers of FactoryBot had done it, but it works. And having the combination of a very expressive language that is dynamic and a test suite that has very clear expectations means that we can actually make it pretty far along with just those tools.
So with that, let's try using one of those tools.
Yep.
See if we can figure out where we were.
Right, rake and bake.
We've got some grain, and then we had cucumbers. All right, so we left off. We were working toward getting this one to pass.
Right. So we'll start with outside in. We'll start with the end-to-end test with these cucumbers. And the failure should find the following for the last category. Name, awesome. Undefined method attributes for nil class.
Right.
Okay.
So let's see what that is.
Database steps.
Database steps 3. All right. Category.last.attributes key. And if we go back, I think if I remember from our last episode, we
defined category up above.
We had defined category, but what looks like should be happening, database steps 3, and when I create instance, FactoryBot.create should do something in category, and so we had jumped into the create method and started working on the unit tests for that.
Yeah.
And that was actually in, if we check out the rake file, I forget the name of this, spec acceptance.
I'm going to move my keyboard around.
More space.
Cool.
All right, we got one thing passing here.
Right.
And let's see, that was like strategy. Let's see. Spec acceptance create spec.
That sounds right.
Just double check. I think there was like a couple different traits. All right. So let's see. Right. So we do have 7 examples, 6 failures. So let's maybe the top of the file. 22.
Let's start from the top. 22 is nil to respond to a new record. Okay. So this is create spec line 22. Create spec acceptance. Create spec line 22. Should not be new record. So this is this is one of our helper methods. And I know that because it's called from spec helper line 32. I've also seen this pattern before in shitta matchers. Line 32. Well, okay. 32 is just running the example. Oops. Okay. So create spec line. Is it?
No,
here?
I think that's a method on FactoryBot.
Okay. So the failure is on line 22.
Expected nil. So create post needs to respond
to nil.
Well, look, if you expected nil to respond to new record question mark.
Right.
And so that's kind of like an RSpec b underscore blah blah blah.
Right. The predicate method on post, but post is nil.
Right.
So first, this subject needs to actually create an object that responds to new record.
Right.
And create is getting called on what?
Well,
post. Oh, this is
factory syntax. Yeah. So factory.
So FactoryBot create needs to create a new object. FactoryBot create. Strategy create seems good.
You know what? I think we may have had a
syntax.
There's. Let's get this out of the way. So we have strategy create. I think there is actually a strategy spec.
Yes.
Strategy create spec.
Outside in.
And this is where we were working with this. Although I think we got this.
I thought we got this. Well, let's run it.
Passing. So. Strategy spec FactoryBot strategy. Right, so that one is fine. Let's do this and see where our spec or rake spec file rake spec unit grep create, and let's see what files have create in them. That's not useful.
No. We could go down the path of. Well, there aren't that many. Let's see.
It doesn't look like there's anything in the unit that seems like it would be.
So talk to me about what you're looking for here.
Basically, it looks like the file that we looked at originally expects a lot more to be implemented.
Implementation. Yep.
So I wonder if there's like another file that we could go to that helps drive that.
Right. Like for example, new record. There might be a unit test around new record for.
Or even like what is create supposed to do? So right now create's returning nil. So I wonder like factory spec might be.
Seems plausible.
Let's check out what factory spec does.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I see your point. That has a factor name, has a build class, associations. Oh, cool. That looks good. Well, no, that's using the class
that's different.
Parent.
It doesn't seem like that's the right place. I wonder if spec acceptance grep create. Let's do grep underscore create.
Right.
Nothing. That's not right.
Underscore. What does the underscore do? Underscore equals create.
There's no. It's rake spec.
Rake spec acceptance.
We should at least get a couple of these that show up. So we have traits. To create global, to create spec. Skip create spec. Or maybe let's try create underscore.
Well, yep. What about we're looking at acceptance test right now, which we kind of were working on an acceptance test before.
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible we might find something in unit tests? Well, actually, we've got spec acceptance, create spec. We could look at
Maybe
that.
we look through and see if there's anything
Sure.
else in create spec that might
on the outside, and then
right,
if
and
we
we can
need to,
jump
we can
down
do
to
deeper.
right.
Makes sense.
See if we can find a way to jump a little deeper. Or actually,
this
I
looks
guess
like-
this is what we were just looking at.
Right.
I do have an idea of one thing that we can do,
Yes.
which is just do something, just do a really simple. I feel like I got hung up on like actually implementing.
Right.
What we really just need to do is
Define to new record on the FactoryBot base class.
right, like have something, have create return
Sure.
something that has.
Yeah, because that'll get the acceptance test passing, but
Right.
and then that'll actually drive us into the implementation tests because something else might fail.
Right. And so this is now going to fail for a different reason.
Right.
Expected no to respond to the record. Or not.
So that returns an empty string.
Shouldn't be.
It should say. I mean, it's not nil.
So maybe that's not getting called now.
Should not be new record. Be new record calls the postfix new record on the subject. The subject is
Right.
create. We have our syntax methods included.
Right. Syntax methods
There.
are included, right, because it's not blowing up when we call create.
Right.
And so
So create is getting called on the syntax methods, but must not be bubbling up to the actual
Right.
implementation because we're not actually passing that through. We're just
here's where we're doing
There.
that. So I guess we can just do that.
Yeah, sure.
here.
Yeah, it's true. Now we'll say
Yeah,
undefined method new record for string for empty for string class.
Right.
Ultimately, we're going to want to call.
I think we
The
called
parent.
that out when we implemented
Right.
that, right? Expected empty string to respond to new record. So what are we creating here? We're just creating something that has new record.
Right. So it could be a struct, an open struct that
Right.
responds to new record. That would do it. New record is true.
Is that how you do that?
New record, huh? Yeah, like that. Yeah, that's right. Return false got true. Hey, pass
All
the
right.
test. Ship it.
There we go.
All right. So now what do we got? Top of the file and 24. And 24 is what? That is
I can just run it.
just run
Just
our
run
line
24.
24. Okay.
It's just it's like randomized, so we're
Yes. Expect nil. So user is nil. User is nil, and user is getting called on the subject, which is this. This is kind of dumb. But it gets us a little further. What I was about to do is do another open struct here. Whatever, sure. So user is no longer nil, it's an empty string. Then empty string is not a user. So let's just say user.new. And then this is going to blow up because user is not a class.
And I just noticed, I think maybe I saw what you noticed.
Oh, it is a class.
Is it?
Yeah. User ID nil to be new record. But maybe that's just Ruby.
I wonder if there's like test helpers. So like
Yeah,
look at
probably.
line 5 there, define model
Line 5.
on create spec.
Create spec. Line 5. Define. Oh.
So let's see if we can figure out what define model is doing.
Sure. Because we're going to need that. Define define model, define model. My guess is it's in the syntax methods. If I do define model, build stub spec, trade spec. I'm gonna close that because that's a lot. Spec support.
Define constant.
Yeah. Define class, define model. There it is. So it accepts a name, defines a class that's an instance of inherits from active record base. We create a table with columns and defaults. I guess it defaults to ID because that's what we were seeing.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I don't see it. Maybe that's what active record does. Active record inserts ID, a serial ID by default.
Right.
So then.
So I think we can actually
It should work.
simplify this a lot.
Yeah.
By
We
doing
say passing the record to.
Or if we do this,
Yeah.
let's try.
Name is the name of the class as a user. Name.constantize. Yeah, I see where you're going with this. You could also do name. Yeah, constantize.
Or
That seems
create.
right. Create.
Or
Well, it's gonna. The test we're running is asking if it's a new record, and it expects.
that was create spec.
Yeah.
Define blah 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 belongs to user. FactoryBot.define.
Right.
Post user create post should not be new record. So let's see.
Yeah, so we need to persist it somehow. Or just define. Well, if it's an active record instance in define model, yeah, just call create. Because active record will respond to that and return a record.
22 is failing again.
Oh, new failure, let's say. Cool.
Constant name post.
Oh, right, it's not user. Wait.
Basically, make the P a capital letter and
Sure,
then call constantize on it, and then call create.
Constantize would do that. Interesting. Well, okay, we're not gonna ship that anyway, so we can get us a little further.
So
Run
now
the
it
test.
need to be an open struct. Because it's an active record object,
It's
it
just a
responds to
post.
new record.
Right.
And then now
Nice.
we've got
Wait a minute.
this.
Constantize for post symbol. Constantize.
Okay. Well,
It's just a string,
well,
string method.
I think like what we've got going on here is so looking at these tests,
Right.
looking what's going to happen in the tests,
Right.
is that we are defining these factories of user and post.
Yep.
And then when you create a post, it also
has a
creates
user.
a user.
Right.
And so we can make this test pass, but we also want this test to pass and this test to pass.
Right.
Which is post, it should not be a new record, but then it also needs to have a user,
Right.
and the user not a new record. So we need both of these to pass in the same way.
Right.
Which I think that means define needs to be a little bit more fleshed out, because
Okay.
we're kind of, while we're using create here, we're relying on define being implemented.
Right.
Because
so,
we can't get create to work.
I see. So the FactoryBot syntax methods are just proxying define, or are we actually implementing define? No, the syntax methods. Where did we just have define pulled up?
So define model is different. So this is more like if you have a factory file in your project.
Okay. So define is in.
Top level, which we just have like an empty implementation. So
Okay.
like down here on line 34.
Oh, I see.
FactoryBot.
I see. So if we remove this implementation, no, let's leave that
We can
there.
leave that, yeah, because
So-
one of the tests will pass.
Define.
And so let's.
The expectation here is that define sets up a new instance with an association. So the easiest thing to get this passing would be define accepts a block.
Well, I guess my suggestion
Yeah.
would be to let's see if we can find define tests.
Oh yeah,
And
sure.
so like it seems to me, and like
Yeah, look at that.
could be wrong, but like the create, and especially since these are in acceptance tests,
Right.
Or it's acceptance spec, it's kind of still outside, right? Like create is more about like the end-to-end experience,
end-to-end, yeah.
whereas define is a much smaller chunk that we can kind of dig into.
Right. So I just did
FactoryBot
colon A.
spec.
This is FactoryBot spec. We want
Let's see if there's like a define spec.
sure spec define spec. Nope.
Definition
Spec seems plausible. Attributes define model and instance generated by factory. Attributes defined.
Nice.
Yeah. So define using symbol to proc. And then
Yeah, a bunch of stuff.
okay. Using symbol to proc when we call define model, we're still using define model. Which test we want to run here? This one?
Let's run
Or just whole
let's run the file and see where we're at.
I'm gonna use my meter T. Okay. Oops. Next. Here. Undefined method build. Yes, these are all. These first three are failing for undefined method build. Let's say line 33. So run that again on line 33. Leader S runs the line. Undefined method build on line 33. So undefined method build for FactoryBot. We could load up FactoryBot RB build. Self.build. And again. Wrong number of arguments given 1. So something. And then expected 0. What did this fail on? Line 6. Sorry, I'm gonna run this specific test again. Line 33. Undefined method password for nil class. So the model that we defined does not have the correct attributes on it. So we could hold on. User is FactoryBot build user. It's returning nil. We could do the open struct dance, or we could be a little bit more sophisticated and look at the user model here, kind of the constantized thing we did.
I think like we already have a good idea of what this implementation would be. So.
Right. So something becomes the model, and it's a symbol. So we want to take the constantized version of the symbol and instantiate a new record. I wonder if active record has like an active record dot. Well, hold on, I'm getting ahead of myself. So I know that symbol doesn't respond to constantize. Is that true? Let's see. We could call it 2S.
Yeah, but
2S.
2S capitalized, constantize.
It's so strange to me that constantize doesn't capitalize. Like that.
Yeah.
So strange to me that constantize wouldn't capitalize it for us, but anyways.
Yeah.
So expected password to equal foo, because we're not passing the attributes of the model.
Right.
And are the attributes are getting
Yes.
set up here in the before. So define. So this is our implementation of define. So build must call define.
Yeah.
And define creates a new model and saturates the attributes with
Well, it doesn't create a new model.
a new model. No? It saturates the object that we just created.
Right.
Okay. So calling self build should then call define.
Right. So we want Well, so we went new here, right?
Yeah,
so
we got new.
So build. Remember, I mean, this is cheating a little bit because we've used FactoryBot a lot, but
Okay.
build, right?
It
the,
takes a
like
set
name
of like a hash or
and
of
attributes, right?
Yeah.
And then I would imagine this is just attributes, right?
Yeah, but how do we know that from the tests? I mean, here we're calling build user. In fact, that
I guess doesn't have to be attributes, huh?
right, exactly. So attributes is optional, but we know that because we've used FactoryBot. If we were to just do this from scratch,
right? I'm still not convinced of like what define it would not necessarily be doing.
Okay.
So like we've got here, I think we need to find another file where define is actually like
unit tested.
is being unit
Yeah,
tested
sure.
because we're kind of jumping,
Yeah.
connecting a lot of
Yes.
the stuff here.
Yeah. So
So let's browse through spec here.
Yeah, spec FactoryBot definition spec. We were just in definition spec.
yeah.
What's definition proxy spec?
So that's another class.
Yeah,
Definition.new.
Find image of factory spec. Define class. Build class. So build class is the implementation that we're testing here. We're going to go down. Holy subject business.
I think so. I have one. It almost seems like there are a lot of methods to do a lot of the same stuff, or at least I'm getting the sense of that.
Yeah. Define, build, create.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, more like let's see, what were we just looking at here? That was declaration, dynamic, new, declaration association. That's a lot of the implementation. Find definition spec. So we finished this.
Right.
Let's see, registry sequence strategy. Declaration. So I almost wonder if we build, create strategy. I wonder if there's like build, attribute, define child, defining methods.
So we're just in definition.
They were just in acceptance definition spec, yeah.
Yeah. So what do you?
All right.
Yeah.
Here's at least a really tiny
Oh, that's perfect.
piece that'll get us to the next step.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definition without block spec.
Which is exactly what we're doing.
Right.
So expected null to be a FactoryBot factory.
We can do that.
We can do that. We have the power. So this was in. Oh, you have your tabs all set up here. This one, right? FactoryBot. Define.
Should return a FactoryBot factory.
Oh, I can do that. So it would just be new factory.
Yeah. Factory. Or, we're in module, right?
Yeah.
Now.
Oh, this is not going to work properly. GT
again.
GT. This is the spec we're running. Unity. Expected nil. It's still nil.
Right, because we want factory by name. User.
Okay. So factory by name is ultimately going to.
What the method we want to do.
Right. GT.
Yeah, like 42.
40.
So we don't have anything to define yet, still.
Okay. So here dot new.
Yeah. There
Test,
we go.
passing tests.
All right, so
and
now
we'll run our other tests.
those are still going to fail, but I wonder if we dig into what FactoryBot factory, if those have any tests.
FactoryBot factory. So this test is passing. What's the outside test of this that will get us to what you just said? Or is that pedantic? you were saying spec FactoryBot factory spec that?
Yeah.
Just run this whole thing?
Yeah, sure.
I don't know. All failing?
It's all fails. But
We want the implementation we just wrote. So this is what I was saying is like, how do we outside in this? What are we looking for FactoryBot new implementation?
Yeah.
Okay, because we just called FactoryBot new. I guess
and then what should that do?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, if we have an acceptance test that will drive out that implementation, that would be ideal. So we could just run spec acceptance, create spec again, and see if that gives us anything else.
Right. Well, I think we're still running into the same problem.
Yeah.
And just we may be able to find one. But so far we kind of haven't, and there's like
Sure.
a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes of define and create and build.
Right.
That I wonder if like at least finding this thread we can start pulling and
Okay.
Start working.
So to
making
reiterate
progress.
what we're doing now, we're going to FactoryBot spec, which was
GT.
I
Oh
lost
no,
it.
1 GT.
1 GT. I must have closed it.
Yeah.
Maybe this one. No, spec acceptance FactoryBot spec, or I lost it.
Spec factory spec. Yeah,
That one. Okay. So running the FactoryBot spec in order to drive out factory.new.
Right.
Okay. And if we look at these tests are all failing, we might as well just do the first one. Yeah, because factory calls factory new. So we'll run that test and drive it out that way.
Mm-hmm.
So we're giving no arguments to initialize. Do we have an initializer here? I guess it's implicit.
It's FactoryBot factory, not
Right.
the module.
Okay, right. FactoryBot factory.
Yeah, there we go.
Here we go. This is a juicy class here. Initialize takes an argument. Okay. And method register factory is
And
not
FactoryBot
defined
module.
on the module. So the module is here. Self.register factory. That's getting called in the before block, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, run that again. Register factory expects an argument. Oops. Whoa. Jesus. Something.
Looks like it takes a factory.
Okay. Find by the name. Okay, cool. So this is where we would expect our factory to respond to some attributes that got passed in, presumably. So factory new, we go back here, we have something.
Mm-hmm.
And stop me if I'm getting ahead of ourselves, but I kind of...
It looks like it's calling it there on line 5 with @name. So
Right.
that seems like a reasonable guess.
Okay. Then we want to call, we initialize, we set an instance of name to name, and we have an add a reader
Sure.
of name. Okay. Cool.
All right.
Passing. Run this whole thing again. And what do we got? Initialize. Oh, so we have some dynamic declarations, association declarations.
What's the top of the file?
Let's see.
Let's just do kind of like the
Yeah,
last
13.
13
probably.
seems
Plausible.
best.
This is where your magic comes in. Spec.
It's FactoryBot.
FactoryBot. Spec lib FactoryBot.
No, let's check what it is. No, it's no.
Yep.
Spec, FactoryBot, factory spec.
Spec, FactoryBot, factory spec. And line 13.
Yeah.
Cool.
Build class.
You want to tap in?
Sure. So now we've got add class, define class user. It has a build class.
Right.
And so if we do def build class.
Right.
This is kind of what we were messing around with.
Conceptized stuff.
Yeah, so add name dot 2s dot capitalize. There's definitely a method, but this seems to work. Or at least maybe there is, maybe there isn't.
There definitely is. I can't remember what it is, but this is fine. This works.
And so that should... I guess I skipped ahead of defining and... expected user got nil, and that's where we were doing this, and get the class, and that passes. And so what's next?
Woo.
A lot less. 17.
17, yep.
Alright. Wrong number of arguments for
initialize
factory.declare attribute. That it's given to expected 0.
Huh. So that's on the module.
Let's look at that. Is it 17? Factory new, FactoryBot.register factory admin. Okay, so we got, which line was that failing on? 20, which is here.
Yep. So that's an instance method on, or
on this factory.
On the factory.
So we're doing this.
It's funny that it didn't complain that declare attribute was not defined.
Right. But let's see.
Does that get mixed in by the module?
Do we have declare attribute anywhere? No.
Huh. Is that an active record thing?
Helper factory. Block new initialize. That's curious. But so the thing that's getting to attributes is actually FactoryBot declaration association new.
Oh, I see.
And so I guess we can do. Let's look at FactoryBot declaration association, and now we've got initialize.
Right, with 2 arguments.
Looks like it's got a name and what do these look like?
Hash attributes. It's going to be attributes eventually. So.
Let's see what we've got now. Undefined method declare attribute for FactoryBot factory. Right, that's why we didn't get it, because it did the argument first. Yep. All right. So back to declare attribute.
Yeah.
Def. I definitely use Ruby a lot.
Yeah.
I should know that. And this takes an association, or takes an attribute, I guess.
Yeah. Declare attribute. Seems right. Let's run that.
Number of arguments given to expected 0.
And this is in the argument again. So implicit new
Yep.
accepts a name and a factory. So this is actually kind of nice that we got all those constant failures up front, because now we have all those files defined.
Does that seem right? Factory. So this takes actually a name and a factory. Huh. Interesting. Well, maybe the name's wrong, but it seems.
I have an assumption about this. Admin here is a trait, maybe.
I think we're doing this.
So author, editor. These are all aspects of a user, right? Oh no, the factory is the post.
Yeah, factory is the post, and then we do another factory here of admin, which
is probably a user or something like that. So we're registering, and maybe it doesn't matter, but it's kind of interesting to see where this is going. So the factory in question is instance of a post class. And then we're registering a factory called admin. And then we're adding some attributes on the post. And then this is where we are now. We have a factory called admin, and we're creating a new
I think we're associating the factory, which is post, with the admin.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. Which it apparently, I think what's going on here is how you in FactoryBot you can kind of name things without them actually being models. So like, even though we've got the class user, and I imagine these are all like different types of users, but like you don't need another class.
Right.
We're not necessarily testing that piece yet, but admin, author, editor seem like all
categories
different
of users.
Categories of user.
Yeah.
And so, like, if you think about when you're building out your factory file, you can kind of generate an admin by calling admin, which is really generating a user.
Right.
But that's way more down the line.
That's
like
domain
episode 10 stuff.
Sort of like Jar Jar Binks shows up. Okay, so associations for factory. So we're back out to our parent test.
No, we're still in the same place.
Oh,
so
yeah,
if you go back
17.
to 1, or I guess we know what the thing's going to be, but it's the same test. We're just a little bit further.
So
right.
Yeah, on line 17 returns association. Oh, it's here on line 23. And then so association needs to be up on the factory. Factory.associations.
Yep.
Empty array, sure.
That's the wrong thing.
What?
That wasn't the right.
Wrong test, bro. Okay, expected 3 associations, got 0. Roll it. So now, associations
could probably be an attribute.
Yeah, I was gonna say add a reader.
Yeah.
And then but interesting. So associations needs to be, in this case, there needs to be an author, an editor, and an admin. And those get called by declare attributes. Declare attributes is down here, so we want to say attributes, and then shovel in attribute here.
Yep.
Chevron in. Let's call it shovel in because do people call it shovel?
Yeah, I think I've heard that more.
Cool. Sometimes you pick up these like weird malapropisms through pairing. Attributes. Okay, add a reader attributes, and then we want to initialize it here. Does it? Yeah, empty array.
And then get rid of that.
And get rid of that. And then we run this again. Cool. You mind if I keep driving on this? What do I mean by the associations? So add a reader.
It's not
associations.
attributes, it's associations.
Near. I'm trying to be fancy with super tab. Associations. That. And then here. Okay. Leader S is failing me today.
All right.
So to be an association, we expect the association that we assigned in declare associations to respond to association predicate method. Do you want to try this out? This seems
Sure.
like we're jumping into a new class.
I don't think.
So there, in declaration
Yeah.
association just needs to respond to attribute, or association rather. Seems fine.
All right. Implicit to respond to association.
Right.
Staff association.
Huh. Interesting. I feel like there's like a mix in here that somewhere that would eventually emerge that like any of those association classes mixes in an association. I'm just saying.
I actually, so the part about attribute, I think there is going to be something a little bit more we're going to need to do, because we're declaring an attribute and all attributes aren't associations. So right now, this test, it's really just associations, but we're going to eventually have attributes.
Right.
Associations is a subgroup of the attributes.
Right. So that's why we have the predicate method on those, because we're ultimately going to return false when we actually have like
29
attributes versus associations.
Yeah. All right. Wrong number of arguments. All right. So now we've got includes associations from the parent factory.
So we're going to want an optional. We're probably going to want an optional argument or a default argument. But let's look at the test.
Yeah. This one. Boom, boom. And which one is that? Factory 5 and initialize. Okay. Here, space that out.
Space it out.
All right. Undefined method name for declaration association. All right. And so we've got this. We're just not storing it.
Yeah.
Name equals name.
Add a reader name.
Reader name. Oops, that's probably the wrong one, huh? Declaration association. Add a reader name. Name. And now it fails for a different reason.
Something funny about that I'm observing, and especially today, is that as we're super comfortable pairing with each other. We've paired a bunch, and people watching might notice that we get like pretty quiet.
Yeah.
And it's because we know pretty much exactly what the other person is doing. And the only, like, when you get into a groove with pairing, it can be the kind of thing where like me navigating, I can sort of observe and see that you're in a groove. Be like, okay, I know exactly what you're doing the right thing, like, go for it.
Right, but on the stream, it's probably not as interesting.
I think it's interesting. I think it is interesting because it points to a way of working together. I mean, maybe the actual act of it is not interesting, but in theory, that when you're pairing, you can get really kind of in the zone if you trust someone. But at the same time, if I saw that you were having trouble, I would like sort of tune in.
Right.
But yeah. It just occurred to me. It's good though. I noticed that we have eight minutes left.
So
let's
see
take
where
a
we're
step back.
at.
Yeah, exactly, and see where we're at.
And we got 32 examples and 26 failures. Let's see how far we can get.
Yeah, let's do it.
So
Jam
we've
on.
got 29, and this one is expect child factory associations map name to be the two different associations, right? So association on parent, association on child, and we've got those two here.
Right.
Let's.
You keep jamming, and I'm gonna pontificate some more.
Okay.
This is the other thing about pairing with Scott in particular, is that I know, like, we can sort of identify the problem at hand and project like 2 steps. Like, I know exactly what he's going to be doing for the next 3 minutes, so I can kind of just like keep an eye on things and observe. But it takes a long time to get to that place where you can just sort of trust someone to jam on something. Okay, now you're actually thinking.
So walking through this, so we're declaring 2 different types of associations. We're doing association with the name association on parent,
right.
Another one with association on child. Then we're creating a new factory post. We're declaring an attribute association on parent,
right.
And then we're calling register factory
On the factory. Okay.
on FactoryBot.
So
with-
which presumably
with factory.
like instantiates the actual model. So
Well, we're I'm in my head right now thinking that register factory is almost like I found a factory file with
right.
the way that like you write it out.
FactoryBot define, etc.
Right, FactoryBot or factories post factory.rb.
Right.
And this is kind of the internals of what's going on in that file.
Mm-hmm.
So we're saying like post, and it's got an association on parent, which could be like, I don't know,
A blog.
user or author or something like that.
Sure.
And then so now we've got a child post, and we're creating a new post called child post, which is kind of like if you have a user and you call :admin,
Right.
and that's just like a parent admin, and then we're declaring another attribute, association on child. So
Right. So it's going to look something like there are going to be 4 arguments in that scenario you just described. There's the actual name of the initial class. If we were to call it like .create. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yeah, no. This is more like the file, the meat of the file, and we're creating another one that's just it knows that post has association on parent. Now we're creating a child factory with another attribute, association on child, and this test is testing that both of those associations are created, even though we only created that child. So if think about it like this.
I see. Okay. Yeah, let's actually sketch out what the
So what's happening
execution
here is
would
like
look exactly.
FactoryBot define post,
Right.
and then
Define do factory post.
post do something like this.
Yeah,
we can
yeah.
just pseudocode.
Yeah.
And then we've got association
Right.
on parent, and then we've got FactoryBot define child post parent post
Right.
do association on child, and if we call FactoryBot.new child post,
Right. It instantiates a new
it should
parent
have both. It should have
post
child
a
and parent.
post. Yeah.
And so that's what this test is saying,
Yeah.
which it's almost driving out the register factory method, because register factory is what kind of saves it
Right.
and gives you this ability to call parent post.
Yeah. Because basically we're going to get it's going to blow up on register factory once we get the internals of the actual expectations for this. Like,
Well, so we're here. We have like a stub for register factory. Register
right.
factory does nothing
right.
right now. So I don't think we're going to get very far in this file.
No.
Or maybe let's see if we can do something quickly for some of the other
Sure.
things in this file.
Sure.
So we can get down from 32. What's next here? 50.
Mm-hmm.
Wrong number of arguments. Declaration dynamic new.
Name false and
That seems meaty. Factor human names, factory name with big letters names. Let's see if this one might be a little bit simpler for us, or if maybe we need to jump down to define factory.
Find by the names for factory.
Factory spec 205.
Oh, interesting.
Factory name with big letters. So subject FactoryBot factory new. So this is actually testing out how we're figuring out the class.
Yeah, the constant test.
Yeah.
So its name should equal lol. Its human name should be lowercase.
Okay, so let's do that. So that was
Sure.
FactoryBot factory,
Yep.
and
So we're gonna define names. And
Names.
Yeah. So names is just the name.
so right now it looks like
Name,
that,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that passes. All
Yeah.
right.
Okay, and then human names.
Yeah, where else were we here? This is all this name stuff. Is there a block?
There is another names, like alias names or something.
Yeah, 190. It's going to give us human names.
Yep.
All the human names
Right.
section. Got 1 minute. Undefined method human names. Let's see how quick we can.
Yep, perfect. And that's going to ultimately be the lowercase.
Two
two
string.
Two string. Okay, got it. Yeah.
All right, we got a bunch of
and
them passing.
We want two lower or lowercase or something like that. A lowercase.
What is it? Downcase.
Downcase. Yes.
And map. What? I think
sim. No, we already have two string. Humanize. Humanize adds his spaces around dashes and what have you.
Before expected happy user got.
Weird.
Maybe it's not downcase. CRB.
No, there's upcase. Downcase bang, because it has to be mutated.
We're out of time.
Ah!
Let's see. If
No.
No, we got worse.
Sorry.
Well, we had 32 of 26 in this file, or 26 of 32, and now we're down to 23. So we got 3 more down.
Yeah.
We kind of had a rough time getting started and finding where to go in the beginning.
Right. Yeah.
But I think for next week we have a good starting place at least of working through the rest of this factory spec and pulling on the threads that we find along the way.
Yeah, and I'm actually curious what you think about why we had a hard time warming up. We talked about this a little bit. We could take like 30 seconds just to recap. What do you think happened there?
I think we were looking for something to jump out to us on like where to jump down to a lower level. But I would imagine if we kept looking, we would find a different path.
Right.
But one wasn't readily kind of like available, and like looking at the acceptance tests, like we're definitely on a place right now, I think, where this is one of the pieces we would have had to flesh out to get that original test that we were looking at, the spec acceptance create spec.
Right.
So like what's going on inside define is
massive.
Probably like
the
80% of FactoryBot.
Yeah, exactly.
And for this test to pass,
I get it.
For maybe not for this test to pass, but for the whole file to pass, we're going to need to flesh out what's going on inside define.
Right. And I see what you're saying. So because the scope of this outside test is so massive, it was difficult for us to identify like what thread to pull on to go inside and start to run the unit tests and iterate that way.
Right. And
Makes
so
sense.
when we found definition without block, which I think is kind of the thread. I don't know, personally I feel like this is the right thread to start walking through of simple define, define
baseline
this class
with just the single symbol.
Right. And now like what is factory by name to be a factory? What does it mean to be a FactoryBot factory?
I don't know, man.
Guess we're gonna find out.
Yeah, we're gonna find
start
out
finding it out next week.
Sounds awesome. All right. Well, thanks y'all for joining, and we're gonna post the recording on the Paircast.com later this week, and stay tuned for an announcement on Twitter at the Paircast. Anything else? Thanks again, 2 cents.
Yeah.
And to ThoughtBot, thanks again for writing all this great code and open sourcing it so that we can learn.
Cool. Thanks.
All right, signing off.